Hey guys, today I'm going to be attempting my very first DIY where I attempt to explain to you how to make something yourself. My projects tend to be very unorganized and I am by no means an expert, so I have never really sat down and tried to explain to someone else how to do what I've done. I understand if this is not your cup of tea, so feel free to go check out the other family vlogs on my channel. I've also snuck a few clips of this cute baby in here. So I am going to be making a DIY pegboard. I saw an account on Instagram the other day that was selling these and I thought, you know what? I can drill holes into plywood, so I'm gonna try that. That is what led me here. Anyways, this is the wall in Charlie's room that I'm going to be putting the pegboard on. There's a lot of light woods in this room and I thought this pegboard would match really well with those. Also, this space on the wall just didn't feel complete, so I thought what better than to put a giant pegboard here. Don't worry, I'm watching her with this balloon. The very first thing that I did was take the measurements for this wall so I know how big or how small to go with the plywood. Next, we headed off to Lowe's and of course I brought my lovely assistant. I was trying to make this as cheap as possible, but with the best looking plywood. What I ended up looking at were these project pieces that were already cut down into smaller sizes, and I quickly got very overwhelmed because there were so many different options that would have worked out. I may have spent like 45 minutes in this aisle pacing back and forth looking like a crazy person, picking things out, putting them in my cart, turning around and putting them back. Fun fact, I actually stopped at a garage sale on the way here and spent $20, so my budget for this is now significantly lower, which means we're gonna have to go with the cheaper option that requires a little bit more work, but I think it'll look great in the end either way. I eventually end up going with this piece of plywood that was, I think, $12.99. I knew I wanted to drill 1-inch holes, so I picked out a dowel rod that was that size, but this is something that you could customize to your taste. This will be about $4, a little bit less than $4. The other supplies that I picked up were 4 screws. You can find them in the hardware section by all of the other screws. I wanted the kind of gold color outside of just like a regular silver. So we got home, I put my baby down for a nap, and my first step was to sand this down because this was not the best piece of plywood. It was pretty rough. It did take me a while. I sanded and went over it and didn't feel like I made a difference, so I went back and sanded some more. Always make sure you go over your edges and your corners really well. After sanding down my plywood, I tried to wipe it off with a damp cloth and I still did not feel like I could get everything off, so I went ahead and took a vacuum to it just to try and get everything as clean as possible, which I now realize is kind of dumb because later I needed to sand it again anyways. Yeah, definitely skip this step. So after my pointless vacuuming came what I would say was one of the harder parts of the project for me, and that is math. I hate math. I would highly not recommend measuring the way that I went about this. I don't necessarily have the proper tools to do this. My guess is that you could probably use one of those laser level things that shoots out a straight line for you and mark your measurements on there for your holes. That is not what I did. I've also seen people do the chalk line where you snap them into place and then you drill at the points where your chalk line meets. The thing with this project is the holes are honestly a preference thing. I decided to space my holes about 4.5 inches apart, and I started them 3 inches from each edge. So after that, I went ahead and measured and marked where all of those holes will be. I hope that makes sense. I went ahead and did a practice hole on a scrap piece of wood just to make sure it was the size of my dowel rod. Perfect fit. So next up is the part that I was most nervous for, the part that I could easily screw up, and that was drilling my holes. Very quickly when I started this first hole, I realized how difficult this was going to be and wondered what I got myself into. It was probably 5 minutes into me thinking that I was just really weak and this was going to be incredibly difficult that I realized this was not the correct drill bit that I needed to be using. I don't think this is the right bit. Luckily, after some digging in our garage, I found the one that I actually needed to be using. This should be better. And after a very long time, I drilled my first hole. First hole! I think I'm gonna have to buy another size dowel rod. Yes, definitely. So all of this took me a lot longer than I was expecting, and I had to stop because it was time to go pick up Emerson. After Charlie went to bed, I decided it was a good time to go switch the dowel rods out for the bigger size. Did you really do a project if you didn't go to the hardware store at least twice? Where are we going? No. As I started drilling my holes, I realized this could possibly be triggering for those people that have the phobia of things with holes in them. Apologies if that is you. This drilling actually took me way longer than I was expecting because I had to stop in between each hole and pry the piece of plywood out of the drill bit, otherwise it would get stuck and I wasn't able to drill the next hole. If I were to make this again, I would definitely spring for the nicer kind of wood. Unfortunately, I did not film much of the next steps because my camera died. I cut my dowel rod into 7 pegs. I took a spare 1x6 that we had and I cut the shelves from that. When it comes to these, it's completely personal preference. I also did not show this, but after drilling all my holes, I went back and sanded my board again. This is when I brought my pegboard up into the space for the first time just to see what the placement on the wall would look like. I definitely stared at it for a long time trying to decide if I wanted it to be higher or to be lower. What I ultimately did was look at the other items that were hanging on the wall in the room, and I placed my pegboard the same height that they are. I love how wrinkly the back of these shorts are. Anyways, the next thing I did was find the studs in my wall. I wouldn't say this was a particularly heavy piece of plywood, but it's obviously going in my daughter's room, so I wanted to be as secure as possible to the wall. So I went and took my time finding the studs in this wall. I believe most of the studs should be 24 inches apart, and my piece was exactly 24 inches wide. I was really hoping that one would be exactly where I needed it to be, but of course it was not. I really wanted my screws to be exactly in the 4 corners of the board, but with the spacing of the studs in my house, that wasn't possible. I'd rather be safe than aesthetically pleasing. That being said, I did not get to hang it exactly centered in the wall where I wanted between the kitchen and the door. I had to slightly put it off to the right to line that up. What I did was move over the other picture frame and the kitchen. It will only slightly bother me, but again, safer than sorry. So I'd actually never worked with this kind of screw, but I dug through the toolkit and I was able to find a bit and made it work with our drill. I was actually pretty surprised about that. Because I know how difficult this plywood was, I pre-drilled my first hole and I was able to hold it up to the wall with my knee because I'm just that strong, and I pre-drilled into the wall. Because my first screw was placed into a stud, it felt pretty secure and I was able to drill my next holes pretty easily. I did make one rookie mistake and I should have taken this little guy off the wall before I hung my pegboard on. It was pretty smooth sailing from there, pre-drilling my holes and then screwing in the last 3 screws. Last up is my favorite and probably the most fun part of any project, and that is styling. With these pegboards, you can do whatever you want. These are great because you can change it every day if you want to. I played around with the shelves a lot before I decided where I finally want things, but I pretty much just put some knickknacks, books, and things that I thought that would be cute. This project was really cheap to do, and with the right tools it'd be pretty easy, but I love how this turned out. It is so cute in the room. It makes it feel so much more, I don't know what the word is, but I love it. I could paint it pretty much any color. You could make it fit any room that you wanted to. If you guys do try this out or ever try out a project that I suggest, I love it when you send me pictures. I want to see what you guys do with this, how you make it work in your home. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit subscribe, like this video if you want to see more DIYs. If you have a DIY that you'd like me to try, you think would look cool in our house, send it my way. I love that. All right, thanks for watching and I will see you soon. Have an awesome day. Come here. Is it cool? You like it? Charlie. Charlie's playing with balloons.